the Brady Quinn Football Show. Draft time, learning a lot about the college game through the minds of one of the greats, Ryan Wilson, and also Brady. If the Sportsline's new data, this is sort of changing. It's fascinating how this is all flipping on us, right? It was the Dolphins were going to locked into the number 1 seed. Then the Bengals were going to own the number 1 seed. And now the Giants actually have a 17.3% chance, Ryan, of getting the number 1 overall pick. If you were the Giants, you're the first overall pick right now. Would you trade it or would you just take Chase Young?
I'd take Chase Young and forget about it. I would actually listen to phone calls. I mean, we're not going to figure it out till the end of April when the draft happens. So, yeah, you listen to phone calls. But right now, Chase Young's at the top of the board, and you go from there. I think it screams more about what's going on. Like we talk about all these other teams that are sort of starting over from scratch. The Giants may be in that conversation as well. Shurmur looks to be on the outs. I don't know what the plan is with Dave Gettleman, but clearly the Giants owners are not happy with how things are going. We know the Dolphins are intentionally trying to lose football games or at least purging the roster to start over. We know that. We know that the Redskins have no idea what they're doing, and they've sort of messed things up. Both those teams have more wins than the Giants, who apparently had a plan this offseason. They traded up in the first round to get DeAndre Baker at the end. They got Dexter Lawrence as part of the Odell Beckham trade. Of course, they drafted Daniel Jones. The defense is terrible. So I think if you take Chase Young and don't even answer the phone, you're going to be a better football team. But if there's a chance to trade down even 2 or 3 spots and accumulate a bunch of picks, and maybe Chase Young's still there, you absolutely do that as well. But the problem is next year this team is going to be a mess no matter what they do unless they sign about 15 people.
It's interesting looking at the Giants because, like you had said, I mean, the truth is no team sets up to go lose every game and get the number 1 overall pick the next year. It's just they don't, right? The coaches can't afford to do that. The players can't afford to do that. I think that's probably why you see so many people surprised the Miami Dolphins have been competitive. I mean, look, the margins of difference between the greatest players and the worst players in the league is not as big as the perception on the outside. That's just the truth. It's why you see like a weekend like this past weekend where, like, how were your picks, by the way, Will and Ryan? How were they? Were they good or bad this week?
Yeah, against the spread, I actually rocked.
Yeah, right. In fact, Brady, here you go. This is the perfect example. Ryan sucks against the spread, and he killed it this week. So that's very well.
This weekend, I think, was a tough one for the majority. Like if we went into this weekend, you picked straight up for the Bengals, Dolphins, and Redskins all to win. I mean, you tell me. Like, did you guys project that happening?
No. In fact, I had a good week. So I don't know how I didn't have a good week betting on Sunday, but I made good picks on Sunday, and the books cleaned up this week. There were a bunch of public favorites who lost, especially on the road, like the Jets, the Browns. So yes, to your point is correct, Brady. The big public favorites, the top, I think it was like 5 of the top 6 public favorites got destroyed this week.
You guys both went 8-8 straight up, by the way. So, and the only reason I eliminated the spread from this because obviously for those bad football teams that were getting a big number, clearly they covered, but they even surprised us even won, which is probably surprising for a lot of people. I don't know that many people would have picked that. However, to Ryan's point, it's not by design, right? I mean, this is an organization that I think they thought they're going to be more competitive than they were this year with the additions they made on defense. And then if things didn't go well, they'd eventually turn it over to Daniel Jones, and he would finish out whatever remaining games they had to get some seasoning and work towards next year. Things were so bad early on that they had to go to Daniel Jones just to spark the offense. He did for a minute, but between injuries and then the lack thereof what they need, I think, to be competitive, this roster is in a world of hurt. And I think Pat Shurmur's in a really, really tough spot because, you know, looking at where they sit right now, so what, they're in the number 2 spot. There's no doubt they'll take Chase Young. I think you have to at their point because they feel like they have their quarterback of the future. So if you can't trade out and still get Chase Young, you take Chase Young because he's that solid of a prospect. But I think the issue for them is, or really more for Pat Shurmur is, look, it matters how you finish. I mean, bottom line is I remember being a part of a Cleveland Browns team. We had 1 win going into the second half of the season. Not only did we improve, we went 4-4 down the stretch, but we improved just even how we played, how we lost, how much more competitive we were. And that 4-game winning streak to finish the year was enough for Eric Mangini to keep his job the following year. I mean, you're a 5-11 football team. If we would have won our first 5 and then lost our last 11, he probably would have been fired after that. But so the perception of how competitive you are, how you finish the season, all that stuff matters. In particular for a head coach like Pat Shurmur, where when we talked about before, this wasn't by design with the front office. They didn't tear this thing down. They had some pieces there they felt good about. And so that's the interesting thing I think to keep an eye on with the Giants moving forward is really what happens with Pat Shurmur. I mean, they have to feel like he has to feel like they've got to win some football games if he wants to have a job next year for the Giants.
By the way, we're all chatting separately. Like, how did you get that on your phone so quick? That was incredible. If you're watching on YouTube, Brady looked down and had our against the spread record ready within seconds.
That was straight up. It wasn't against the spread.
So straight up record. How did you do that so fast?
I have my ways. I keep up on things because Prisco always talks so much garbage about our picks that I do have to keep a running record for another company that I work for that we only pick straight up. They won't, unfortunately, because we're a partner with the NFL, let us do it against the spread. But we picked straight up, and last week was an awful week for me. And I think Prisco got the better of me. So between our crap talking back and forth, that gets thrown in there.
So you have the page bookmarked on your phone, and you were able to go to it.
Not a page. I just know how to get to it quickly.
Okay. All right. Interesting.
I have my secrets, Will. I can't share them all with you.
Sirius won't let you pick against the spread?
They will not.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Not quite there yet. Not quite there. Maybe once there's actually a team in Las Vegas, maybe they'll be like, hey, who cares about that now?
Hey, not to go totally off topic, but I am curious about your thoughts on this because I know you're not big into betting. Like you don't gamble on. You're not a big gambler. You know how to slide a little information our way when we need it. Not inside information, just football.
No, I mean to be quite honest with you, we had a briefing before the season for Fox Sports because I do call NFL games. I call it a week 2 game. I'll call a week 16 game, maybe a week 17 if my schedule permits. And they were actually saying that, look, this is new territory for everyone, but think about it like this: you really can get prosecuted like it's insider trading if you are an analyst and if you are calling a game and betting off of that, and there's obviously, it's very easy to track that, especially with what's set up right now within the United States, geofencing, all the other terms that go along with it. But we were warned about that big time. And so it's to the point where it's not even worth it for me to talk about it that much because I don't want to put myself in harm's way.
Yeah, no, I don't want your insider information. What I want to know is what do you think about Josh Shaw going out to Vegas and sitting down and doing a 3-team money line parlay out second half lines, fading his own team and getting suspended indefinitely? Is he banned from the league, whatever it is?
Yeah, I mean, he's suspended at least for this year and probably, look.
2020. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, he's for next year. Bottom line is they want to set such a harsh tone on this that, anyone who even attempts this sort of thing will be deterred from ever doing it in the future. And I'm 100% on board with that. If they want to ban the guy altogether just to make an example out of him, I could care less about that either. I think the hard part for him in that situation is, obviously he's, he wasn't even active, right? He's on IR at that point in time. He has no impact whatsoever on the game. Then granted, he's trying to make a little money back off of it. But is this the same Josh Shaw that was from USC that jumped out of a window?
And told he was going to save kids, and then later it found out he was doing something.
He was doing drugs or whatever. I mean, it's at this point, it's just bad character. I don't like to use that to make the example. However, in this case, just probably not a very smart guy. Probably not a guy that's going to be in the NFL.
It's a layup for the league too, because it's this idiot's the one betting on football. Let's ban it. He's not going to be in the league anyway. Let's go and hammer this guy. And so yeah, Josh Shaw. I just thought that he
didn't win either. He didn't win, from what I understand.
He bet again. So he bet money line second half money. I don't even bet second half money line parlays, and I'm a DJ. But he bet a second half money line parlay, including one leg that was on the Buccaneers -1 against the Cardinals, and the Cardinals covered. So he faded his own team, lost, and did it during a second half money line parlay.
I will say this. I've been to a sports book in the Bahamas. This is after I was done playing, and it was actually during college basketball season.
Yeah.
And that experience alone was amazing. I was like, this is unbelievable. This is what normal people get to do. They actually get to go watch a game, put a little money on it. So there's an incentive to watch or want to root, even if the game's out of hand on the over, under, what have you, or the spread. I thought it was the most fun thing in the world. I can see how it could be highly addicting. I can see how people would just want to live in there, especially during March Madness. It is the greatest thing in the world. So I do sympathize, with all the guys out there who actually go out there and do that. And I do feel bad for the kid Because look, he just wanted to have fun like everyone else. It is incredibly fun. I'll give you that.
And he lost. Like, we're gonna ban him for losing. He's betting against his team and he lost. Unbelievable.
Well, no, I mean, yeah, obviously. Like that end of the thing's like, yeah, ban him. He shouldn't be able to play again. Now he gets all his rest of his life if he wants to sit in a sports book and bet or create those parlays.
I'm just saying, it's like it's like the ultimate DGen move to bet against your own team on a second half money line parlay. Because you don't even have any information. Like the game's already started. You're not like talking to your buddy at halftime. You're like, hey, look, he's like, how's Kyler?
Maybe that's like a reason why they should have taken it lightly on him, though. Like at that point, it's not insider information. He's just essentially doing what anyone else would do in that situation.
True. All right. Well, I know I'll be betting on these conference championship games this weekend. Excited for them. Who are you looking at in the old Big Ten championship game? Not from a gambling perspective. I think Ohio State's going to mop Wisconsin's socks off, knock socks off, whatever it is.
Here's the reasons why I think there is the likelihood that does and does not happen. All right, I'll start off why that shouldn't happen. It's really hard for a team to beat a team twice. I don't care if it's in the NFL or if it's in college football. So it starts there because the bottom line is you learn more from your losses than you do your wins. You can definitively go back and say this lost us this game. When you win games, you can say it's a mistake, but it's not viewed or looked at as costly when you lose a game versus when you win a game. So Wisconsin has that to their advantage. They're not playing in Columbus either. They have that to their advantage. They're playing on a neutral site in Indianapolis where weather's not going to be a factor. Weather was a factor for the Ohio State-Wisconsin game earlier this year. So for those reasons, I think there's a chance that maybe they're looking at Ohio State and saying, all right, they've played Penn State, they've played Michigan recently. Like this team could be kind of beat up physically as compared to, Wisconsin played Minnesota last week, but they handled that game for the most part, and their schedule hasn't been quite as difficult since playing the Buckeyes. And so for that reason, maybe there's a slight advantage for Wisconsin to keep this close. And I will also say their passing game has come on a little bit the past couple weeks. Jack Cohn's been a bigger part to Quintez Cephas in particular, and there is a little bit more balance to it. But they've got to figure out how to block Chase Young. He had 4 sacks this last matchup. Everything they tried under the sun did not work. So that's going to be a problem. That's going to be an issue. Justin Fields and J.K. Dobbins have only gotten better. Dobbins over the past, I think, couple games is averaging over 180 yards on the ground and 3 touchdowns per game. He's been phenomenal. So they're going to rely heavily on that. This is actually the team that, if you're figuring out who needs to stop the run, it actually needs to be Wisconsin, stopping Ohio State's rushing attack. Fields could be a little banged up too. That might help Wisconsin, but 37 touchdowns and 1 interception this year. It's the best touchdown to interception ratio. He's been phenomenal. And so I think the Wisconsin secondary is going to have a really hard time matching up with the Ohio State wide receivers. If you look at their secondary for Wisconsin, the last 3 or 4 games, they're giving up, I think on average, like over 250 yards through the air, 2 less sacks per game too in that span. So they're having trouble getting after opposing quarterbacks and trouble not giving up big plays. And so I think for that reason, there's definitely a chance Ohio State could just mop the floor with them and move on to the college football playoff.
Brady, I thought Okudah had his best game this season last week against Michigan. Jeffrey Okudah is going to be the top cornerback drafted almost certainly. And you mentioned, I think last week or the week before, that you spoke with Urban Meyer, and he thinks every player on that defense except maybe Tough Borland is going to get drafted. I don't know if Sean Wade's going to play. He was sort of banged up last week. He didn't see the field. But if you're ranking these guys after Chase Young and Jeffrey Okudah, who do you like? And, what do you think about their chances? Obviously, what do you think how in terms of how they're going to play against Wisconsin defensively?
Yeah, so I would say Harrison, the linebacker, is really good. He's a player that's pretty versatile. I think he can cover decently well for a guy of his size, but he runs really well. He's a sideline-to-sideline backer. Pete Warner, they're not afraid to put out there. He's probably not a high draft pick, but maybe a guy you take a little bit later, ends up being a special teams player and all that. But they think he's going to test a lot better than people think. They do split him out and put him on running backs all the time or tight ends in coverage. In fact, if you go back to the Penn State game, they think Freiermuth, their tight end, is somewhat comparable to Gesicki, who they had, who's now with the Miami Dolphins. They would split him out often and targeted him early in that game versus Pete Warner. Warner did a pretty darn good job. So he's another guy, again, who could get drafted. Devon Hamilton on the inside, a little bit undersized, but really good quick, plays with good leverage, probably more of a late-round draft pick. But I think a guy, if you watch the film, you're going to be really impressed with what he's shown so far. Damon Arnett, he's not a first-round draft pick, but I think when you're looking at him as a cornerback, definitely come more 3rd, 4th round as far as his skill set and his ability. And I think you go back to last week. I mean, look, Ohio State gave up a lot of yards to Michigan. I mean, those receivers aren't any slouch, and Shea Patterson played pretty well. But, they didn't have Shaun Wade. And I think Shaun Wade's a big-time difference maker for them at that spot. He's a guy who's going to run well and test well. He might sneak up into kind of the second round. He might be a little bit better than people think just because of the position he plays. And then I always mix up Pryor and Fuller. But Fuller, the safety in the back end, he's going to be another guy that's going to get drafted pretty high in my opinion, depending on how the safety class looks. But one thing about Okudah that I found was interesting, talking to Michigan before the game, they were saying like they really didn't feel like he was tested that much this year, and they were curious to take some shots at him and kind of test him out to see how he'd match up versus the Michigan wide receivers. And so usually when they say he hasn't been tested, they're kind of telling you they want to see how good he is. And I think, you're saying, well, he had his best game. Well, yeah, because they actually threw at him a lot more. Most teams don't even want to have to do that to him. But and I'll tell you this much, just from being in the stadium, there was 2 specific examples of some tight coverage. It looked like he might have gotten there a little bit early. Maybe in the NFL they call that defensive pass interference, but he ended up getting away with it at the college level. Either way, he's a guy that I think teams maybe, especially once they get to the playoff, won't be afraid to test, because if Michigan's willing to do that, the Clemsons of the worlds, the LSUs of the worlds, they're definitely going to try to test him, whether, if he's isolated up one-on-one. And so we'll get a little bit better idea of just how good of a cornerback he is once he goes against some of the top wide receivers that would be probably in next year's draft too.
You mentioned Clemson. I'm fascinated by Clemson because Paul Feinbaum on ESPN. Have you heard what Paul Feinbaum said?
No. Let's hear it though. Let's hear what old Paul.
Well, we don't have it to play, but I will give you the quote. I'm going to paraphrase it, but this is not a joke. I'm not kidding when I say this. He was on like the morning time show it is that they do. It's Get Up or whatever. Whatever.
Wake up.
Wake up.
Yeah.
Wake up to generic NFL. Wake up to generic headlines and sports shouting. Anyway, he's on Get Up. Sorry, I don't mind the show. And he was asked about Clemson and asked about Dabo Swinney, and said that Dabo is like, mentioning how he doesn't think Clemson gets the same respect, et cetera, et cetera. And he said, Dabo Swinney he basically called him a sore winner, and then said, and this is almost a direct quote, but again, I'm paraphrasing. He said, someone needs to give him a pacifier and put him in timeout and come get him on December 28th when he plays a legitimate team for the first time this season.
Yeah, I'm not going to go that far to question the strength of the schedule that they've played. It is what it is. The ACC has been down this year. You know that. You're a Wolfpack alum.
Yeah, but Dabo has more wins in the SEC than like 4 SEC teams. So it's like kind of ridiculous that like he just played who he played. They haven't lost since 2017. Feinbaum's just trying to drive some traffic and some clicks and to do what he does.
Well, no. Hold on. Let's be objective about this, okay? Dabo has been saying how, no one was talking about us, until the past few weeks. Now everyone's saying we're good and we've been the same team all year. No, you haven't. You haven't been the same team all year. That's the truth. I watched the film. You can't tell me the same team that struggled to beat UNC is the same team we've seen the last 7 weeks, okay? Like, this is a different team, and this is a team that's playing much better. Trevor Lawrence has averaged 3+ touchdown passes the past 7 games. Etienne's averaged, I think, 130 yards on the ground, maybe close to 150 scrimmage yards, whatever it is when it averages out. But the entire team is playing at a much higher level. So he can say no one's talking about him. People were talking about him. We were just saying you don't play anyone, so we don't know how good you are, but you're definitely one of the top teams in college football. There is some truth to that. Like, there's been some comments he's been saying that you're saying to yourself, what's the point? Well, the point is he's trying to motivate his team. You have to do something to motivate them. And that's one of the things that I've really taken from Urban Meyer, talking about how, the coaches, the OCs, the assistants, the DC and all that, it's the games when, there's not a ranked number next to that opponent where you have to, really coach and really motivate those guys and get those guys up for the lesser opponents. That's where the motivation comes in. The big games take care of themselves. The players understand what's at stake, how important it is, how good that team is across from them. They prepared and watched them all week. It's the teams that you watch on film and are bad, and your players know that are bad too. And so that's the psychology, I think, behind Dabo and what he's trying to do is he's trying to create an edge to this team. He's trying to create a sense that maybe people don't believe in this team, right? Didn't he just say the other week, Will, that no one picked him to go undefeated through the ACC? Wasn't there over-under before the year at 11.5 wins? And wouldn't everyone would take the over or 12 wins on that? So he has said some things that you're just going, come on, dude. Like, we get it. You're trying to motivate motivate your team and all that. It's all good. Like, believe me, we all think you're one of the best teams in college football. We just haven't seen you play anyone yet. And so there's a little bit of both sides on it. I just would never phrase it in that way. That's just disrespectful to me, and I'm not going to take that route.
Okay. Quinn, Urban for Cowboys, Dabo needs Passy. What do you who are you looking at, Ryan, in this Clemson game? Clemson, Virginia. Virginia's actually got some players that'll hit you, but I don't know.
No, they don't. Come on. Okay. Who are you kidding?
Clemson starts with Isaiah Simmons, the linebacker / safety. He's a freak athlete, and you can line him up at linebacker, or I've seen him play free safety. I was at the Syracuse game, and he was the deepest player on Clemson's defense. 30% of the time. I mean, he can do everything, and he was a really good defensive player on last year's team that had those 3 first-round picks on the offensive line. They also have T. Higgins, of course, the big wide receiver. They have Travis Etienne, the running back, who's obviously a big part of what they do and helps out Trevor Lawrence a lot. They have Kavon Wallace, who is a safety as well. So they have a lot of players, maybe not as many as they had a year ago, but obviously this team is really, really good for a reason, and a lot of it has to do with Dabo Swinney's ability to motivate his troops, but also because he has a lot of really good players out there. So I think Isaiah Simmons is a top 10 guy, and it starts from there.
We actually had a 5-star review question. We're going to move on to those. You can leave a 5-star review, and if you ask a question, we will get it answered. There's a bunch of Brady questions in there. Somebody was like, somebody was like, how does Brinson put up with Brady? I was like, that's what I'm wondering.
You wrote that one.
I did. I went downstairs and logged into my wife's phone and created a fake iTunes name. How does that handsome Brinson guy put up with Brady?
See, what they don't realize is someone has to give you a hard time, Will, because most of the guys, you guys just all kind of talk about, whatever it is, the analytics or the data or whatever you're researching and all that you're coming up with. So someone has to keep you in line. Someone has to give you a hard time.
Well, SB Trade 23 asked, I noticed that no one's mock drafts. He specifically said Ryan too. I noticed that no one's mock drafts have Travis Etienne as a first-round running back. As a Clemson fan, I'm curious, is this because his early exits from Clemson blowouts is hurting his stock, or is he just not viewed as a first-round running back?
Here's what I think, and I'm interested to hear what Brady says. I mean, it's hard to take a running back in the first round. That's just sort of been the what we've seen recently. Obviously, Saquon Barkley's an exception. Josh Jacobs went late last year. But Travis Etienne, DeAndre Swift, J.K. Dobbins, Jonathan Taylor, Zach Moss out of Utah, those guys are pretty closely grouped together. And if someone went 25 to 32, it wouldn't surprise me. And if they all win the second round, it wouldn't surprise me. But I like DeAndre Swift a little better right now because he can catch the ball coming out of the backfield. Etienne hasn't done that quite as much, but I'm sure he's capable of doing it. But you want to see that with some regularity if you're trying to project that in the NFL. But right now, I like all those guys a lot. It's just that if you have other needs, especially along the offensive and defensive line, you probably focus on those early, circle back, and get a running back later.
It's interesting. He's a first-round talent to me. I think when you watch Travis Etienne, he very easily could be taken there. But, you're probably not going to see that because of a couple things Ryan alluded to. The running back class, I think, has some depth to it, and there's a number of players that you maybe could put ahead of him. The 40 time is going to be big for Etienne. He strikes me as a guy who might be like a 4.52 guy, 4.50 guy. I don't know that he's going to be able to eclipse that 4.5 mark and be in the 4.4s. That's usually pretty important. The 10-yard split's usually really important. If he could be somewhere in the low 1.6s or high 1.5s, all those things kind of show explosion, quickness, burst, things that you're going to need as a running back. In the NFL, the lack of catches that might be a small piece of it. I just think when you look at this league right now and what they put a premium on and what wins and what doesn't, if your team's a good football team, you probably have a good offensive line. If your team's a good football team, you probably have a good defensive line. So if you're a team drafting in the first round, I think you're eating up whatever offensive line talent and guys you can plug in and play or can be cornerstones on your offensive line. You're eating those guys up as much as possible. The defensive line, same thing, eating them up as much as possible. Those things I think come first. You build in and then work yourself on the way out. And it doesn't help that we tend to find guys who are college free agents who can come in and play behind a good offensive line or end up being a Pro Bowl caliber player. Philip Lindsay was that 2 years ago. So this isn't to say that he's not a first-round talent. I actually think he is. Swift as well is another running back that Ryan threw into that category, and there's no doubt he is. But it's going to come down to how they test to see if he's like that special of a running back that he could be considered somewhere there in the first round. But because outside of that, I think then you look at the fact that, all right, you'd rather take somewhere else that might be harder to find in this draft as opposed to a running back where you feel like you could find those guys and maybe they're a dime a dozen.